Just so we're clear, Michael leaned forward, his voice dripping with arrogance. We wanted you to know now, so there's no confusion later. Everything goes to us. His words hit me like a sucker punch to the gut, and suddenly, the homemade lasagna on my plate, the one Mom promised to lure me home with, felt like lead in my stomach. For a moment, the dining room grew silent, except for the distant hum of traffic outside our suburban home. My heart pounded in my ears as I stared across the polished table at Michael and Lily, my younger twin siblings. Both were smirking now, their eyes glittering with self-satisfaction. Excuse me? My voice shook despite my effort to steady it. What do you mean, everything? Exactly what he said, Emily. Mom interjected sharply. Her smile had faded, replaced by a defiant set of her lips. Your father and I have decided to finalize our will, and we wanted you to hear it directly from us. The house, the lake cabin, all of it is going to Michael and Lily. I turned toward Dad, hoping for some sign of hesitation, some indication that this was a cruel joke or misunderstanding. But his gaze was fixed on the silverware in front of him, avoiding my eyes altogether. The silence that followed stretched painfully until he finally spoke, his voice quiet and carefully controlled. Emily, you have to understand our reasoning, Dad said, folding his hands slowly. You've done extremely well for yourself. Your mother and I are proud of your career and the success you've built. Michael and Lily, well, they're still finding their footing. They need more support. I blinked hard, fighting the hot sting of tears. Support? For years, I'd quietly shouldered the family's financial burdens, believing it was my duty as the oldest child. Their house payments, Michael's endless tuition charges, Lily's whims and costly hobbies, all quietly covered by me. Apparently, none of it counted for anything. My heart twisted bitterly as I looked at my parents' faces. Their expressions hardened against me. It was a betrayal sharper than I'd ever anticipated. So, this is my reward for spending the last 4 years paying your mortgage? I demanded, my voice low but firm. For the tuition bills? The $30,000 I put into renovating that lake cabin last summer? You're leaving me nothing because I made something of myself? Mom sighed dramatically, shaking her head. This is exactly why we didn't want to tell you. You always bring it back to money, Emily. It's never about family with you. Heat surged into my cheeks, my fists clenched beneath the tablecloth. It was always about family for me, I countered. Every sacrifice I've made was because of family.
Because you asked Mom.
Because you said family sticks together. Michael scoffed, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms smugly. You're acting like some martyr. Nobody forced you to help. You just liked playing the hero. Lily laughed quietly, twirling a strand of her glossy hair around one finger, eyes narrowed with amusement. Maybe you thought if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us. The cruelty of her words stung deep, reopening a wound I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. My parents didn't react, didn't reprimand her. Their silence was louder than any defense they might have mounted. They'd always indulged Michael and Lily, protected them, excused every irresponsible choice. Yet here I sat, after years of sacrifice, being painted as greedy and selfish. Anger flared through me, scorching away the last threads of patience. You're right, Michael, I finally said, forcing my voice to remain steady. No one forced me, but from today onward, no one can guilt me into being this family's ATM either. I'm done. I pushed my chair back and stood abruptly, ignoring the surprised looks on their faces. For a second, the scent of marinara and baked garlic lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of what I'd foolishly hoped would be a comforting family evening. Instead, I'd been ambushed, humiliated, and rejected in the same home I helped pay for. As I grabbed my coat from the hallway, the front door swung shut behind me with a definitive thud, cutting me off from the voices inside. Voices that no longer mattered. Outside, the cool Portland air hit me sharply, helping clear my head, but my heart still felt raw, aching with disbelief. My own family had used me, discarded me, and left me feeling worthless. I climbed into my car and slammed the door shut, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands as tears finally escaped down my face. During the silent, lonely drive back to my apartment downtown, memories flooded my mind. Each financial sacrifice, each canceled vacation, every night I'd spent awake juggling spreadsheets and payments to ensure they stayed comfortable. All of it done silently, without complaint, out of a misguided sense of love and obligation. How naive I'd been, believing my efforts were appreciated, let alone valued. Back home, my apartment felt strangely unfamiliar now, as if everything around me had been tainted by the painful revelation. I poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet, the expensive one I'd saved for special occasions. Somehow, tonight's bitter lesson seemed fitting enough. Settling onto my couch, I opened my banking app. The recurring monthly payments, $1, $800 labeled parents' mortgage, another $600 for their utility bills, mocked me from the screen. Without hesitation, I canceled them both, a quiet defiance bubbling up within me as the confirmations flashed. As the evening wore on, I replayed the dinner conversation obsessively. The anger I'd felt earlier started to melt into something deeper: sadness. The rejection wasn't just financial, it was emotional. A lifetime of feeling second best, finally confirmed openly. Yet, even amidst the hurt, something new stirred within me. A sense of liberation, a realization that my worth wasn't defined by their acceptance. It was time to reclaim my own life, free from the expectations and obligations that had once felt like chains around my spirit. I knew my parents, Michael, and Lily wouldn't let this go quietly. There would be calls, arguments, perhaps even retaliation. But tonight marked a turning point. No matter how hard they pushed back, I silently vowed to myself that I was done being their victim. Done quietly accepting disrespect under the guise of duty. From this moment forward, my life was my own. As I drained the last drop of wine from my glass, I found myself smiling bitterly into the darkness. My family had invited me home to announce they'd left everything to Michael and Lily, but they'd given me something far more valuable tonight: freedom. Sleep eluded me that night. I stared up at the shadowy ceiling of my apartment, my mind spinning through an endless loop of disbelief, hurt, and anger. The city lights outside flickered softly through my curtains, indifferent to the turmoil consuming me. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived those humiliating moments around the dinner table, the smugness on Michael's face, the amused contempt in Lily's eyes, and worst of all, the stony silence from my parents. Their silence cut deeper than my siblings' barbed words ever could. By sunrise, exhaustion had drained me of tears. I dragged myself out of bed, brewed strong coffee, and sat numbly at my kitchen table. The morning news murmured softly in the background, but I wasn't listening. Instead, memories pressed in from every corner, relentless in their clarity. Had I been blind all these years, or had I willingly ignored the signs, desperate to believe that my family valued me for more than just the financial security I provided? My phone buzzed suddenly, vibrating harshly against the wooden table. It was Mom. My stomach twisted into knots, and I let it go to voicemail, unwilling, or maybe unable, to hear her voice so soon. A minute later, the voicemail notification blinked impatiently. Against better judgment, I played it. "Emily, please stop being so dramatic," her voice echoed, a familiar mixture of exasperation and guilt. "Call me back. You know family doesn't treat each other like this." A hollow laugh escaped my lips. Just escaped my lips. How ironic. Family, her favorite weapon of emotional manipulation. Family only mattered when it justified their needs. Never mind. I deleted the message and set the phone aside, determined not to crumble beneath her practiced guilt trips. Over the following days, the calls multiplied. First Mom, then Dad. Finally, Michael and Lily chimed in, alternating between condescending lectures and sarcastic pleas. But none of their voices held even a shred of remorse, only mounting irritation that their financial lifeline had abruptly vanished. Finally, after a particularly bitter call from Lily accusing me of selfishness and jealousy, I blocked them all. Peace fell over me for the first time in years, fragile and unfamiliar. Yet beneath the quiet relief simmered a dull, persistent ache, one I wasn't sure would ever fade completely. I threw myself into work as a distraction. Then, at construction's latest project, a sleek medical office complex in Sacramento, demanded my full attention. Meetings, blueprints, client walkthroughs, things I'd always handled with grace now felt like desperate escapes from the reality waiting for me outside office hours. I extended my workdays, volunteered for extra travel, anything to delay facing the emptiness of my newly quiet evenings. 3 weeks passed without direct contact from my family. I began cautiously hoping they'd accepted my decision and moved on, but deep down I knew better. It was Friday afternoon when the text came flashing ominously across my screen. Family meeting tonight. Emily, you owe it to us to be there. My heart rate spiked. I stared at the message, disbelief warring with outrage. I didn't owe them anything, not anymore. But curiosity, mixed perhaps with a misguided hope for reconciliation, nagged at me. Before I could overthink it, my fingers typed a single-word reply. Fine. Pulling into my parents' driveway that evening felt surreal. Michael's flashy motorcycle and Lily's obnoxiously blue Kia were already there, parked side by side like matching symbols of entitlement. Dread twisted sharply in my gut as I approached the familiar front door, now feeling as foreign and unwelcoming as an enemy's fortress. Mom opened the door, her forced smile barely masking irritation. Emily, glad you decided to come, she said stiffly, ushering me into the house I once thought of as home. Daisy's here too. I answered the call, trying to keep my voice steady despite the dread settling in my chest. Hello. Sarah, where have you been? My mother's voice was thick with faux concern. We've been trying to reach you all morning. We need to talk. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. I'm not interested in talking, Mom. Don't be like this, she sighed, her tone suddenly softer, trying to pull at my heartstrings. You can't just cut us off like this. We're family. Family. The word felt like a dagger now. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. You don't get it, do you? You've used me for years, and when I needed you most, you turned your back. This isn't about family anymore. It's about control. Control? She scoffed, her voice rising. We've done nothing but try to help you. You think you're the only one who's made sacrifices? Your father and I. Sacrifices. I interrupted, my voice thick with bitterness. Your sacrifices have been using me as your personal bank, Mom. I'm done. Don't ever call me again. I hung up before she could say anything else, the finality of it sinking in. The weight of years of unacknowledged pain, unpaid debts, and broken promises pressed on me like a physical force, but beneath it, there was freedom. A strange, terrifying sense of freedom. I set the phone down, breathing deeply as I looked around my apartment. It was the only place left where I wasn't reminded of the family I had been desperately trying to hold together. I could feel the weight of the decision I had just made, but it was nothing compared to the relief that followed. Moments later, there was a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and my first thought was that it was my family again. I hesitated, then opened it slowly, half expecting the worst. To my surprise, Aunt Daisy stood there, her face soft with concern. Her eyes held the same warmth as before, but there was something else, a quiet understanding that made my chest tighten. Can I come in? She asked gently, her voice kind but cautious. I stepped back, allowing her inside. Without a word, she pulled me into a hug, her arms wrapping around me like a shield, something I hadn't realized I'd needed until that moment. I'm sorry, Sarah, she whispered, holding me tighter. You didn't deserve any of this. I let out a shaky breath, tears finally coming in torrents. Daisy said nothing else. She simply held me as I let go of years of anger, disappointment, and the suffocating weight of false obligation. When I finally pulled away, she smiled softly, though it didn't reach her eyes. They won't ever change, you know, Daisy said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. But you can. And you will. I nodded, wiping my eyes. The tightness in my chest had loosened just a little, the edges of the storm inside me starting to clear. I think I'm starting to believe that. Aunt Daisy stayed for hours, just talking, listening, reminding me that I wasn't alone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I could hear myself think, uninterrupted by guilt, resentment, or the burden of everyone else's expectations. When she finally left, the silence in my apartment felt different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't oppressive. It was my own. And for the first time in years, I finally felt free. Extortion. I echoed, my voice cold.
No, Dad.
It's what happens when you cross a line and try to make someone's life miserable out of spite. Liam did this. Liam pays for it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, the only sound the faint hum of static. Then Dad's voice came back, rough and resigned. We'll get you the money. But this is the last time you do this, Sarah. You're tearing this family apart. I fought the urge to laugh bitterly. Tearing the family apart? You've been doing that for years. I'm just the one who finally stopped pretending. Dad didn't respond, and I hung up before I could say anything else. The feeling of satisfaction was fleeting, replaced by the cold weight of finality. The price for my independence had been high, but it was worth it. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without the crushing weight of obligation, without the constant nagging guilt of trying to make my family happy. The money was transferred quickly, but the tension didn't dissipate. Liam barely acknowledged his consequences, his usual arrogant smirk replaced by a sullen glare when we crossed paths in the weeks that followed. But I was done. I had made my choice, and there was no going back. Work continued to be my sanctuary, and the satisfaction of seeing projects come to fruition gave me a sense of accomplishment I'd never felt before. But the loneliness still lingered, a quiet reminder of the family I'd let go. I would be lying if I said I didn't miss the small moments, dinner table conversations, holidays, the sense of belonging. But they were only memories now, memories of a family that had never truly been mine. The final step in my journey came unexpectedly. One quiet Sunday afternoon, a letter arrived at my door. I knew it wasn't for my family. There was no reason to expect anything from them anymore. I opened it slowly, and inside was a small, handwritten note from Aunt Daisy. It was simple, but it hit me harder than I expected. Asterisk, you've finally done it, Sarah. You've taken control of your life, and I couldn't be prouder of you. Don't let anyone make you feel small again. Asterisk. Tears stung my eyes as I read the words. Aunt Daisy had always been my anchor in the storm, but now I was the one who had finally found the strength to stand on my own. And as I closed the letter and set it down on my kitchen table, a sense of peace washed over me. No more manipulations. No more guilt. No more sacrifices for people who never understood what it truly meant to love. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I knew it was mine to walk. Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. The usual tirade of guilt and manipulation, the endless blaming, was absent. For the first time in my life, she didn't have the power to make me feel small, to make me doubt myself. I held my breath, waiting for her to respond, but the call ended with a sharp click. 4 days after, my phone stayed silent. The expected onslaught of angry calls, manipulative pleas, and guilt trips didn't come. It was as if my family had decided I was no longer worth the effort. The realization stung deeper than I anticipated. I had cut them off, but in doing so, I had also lost the illusion of family. It was a strange sort of grief, quiet, insidious, and impossible to ignore. But it didn't break me. In the weeks that followed, I continued to carve out my new life. The trip to Italy was everything I had dreamed of, freedom in the form of exploration, time alone with my thoughts, and the joy of finally experiencing something for myself, unburdened by anyone else's expectations. The rich landscapes of Rome, Florence, and Venice wrapped around me like a soothing balm, reminding me that I could still find beauty in the world without their constant interference. It was in Italy, standing on a rooftop overlooking the glittering canals of Venice, that I felt the last vestiges of my old self, the one I had tried to please, the one I had been before the betrayal, finally slip away. The grief of losing my family wasn't gone, but it no longer had the same sting. I had learned how to exist outside their shadow, how to thrive without their approval. But even as I reveled in my independence, I couldn't escape the shadow of what had happened. I had taken the steps to rebuild my life, but at what cost? My thoughts drifted back to Aunt Daisy. She had always been the one to hold our family together, the bridge between me and them. But even she couldn't change the truth. Once the bond of obligation was severed, there was no easy way to repair it. I sat at a small cafe in Rome, sipping my espresso as I scrolled through the news on my phone. The text from Aunt Daisy appeared out of nowhere, a quiet message that somehow hit me harder than anything else had in weeks. Asterisk Sarah, your mom wants to talk. She's asking if you'll come home. She's different now. Asterisk. I stared at the screen, my mind whirling. Home. What did that even mean now? Had enough time passed for them to truly understand? Or were they just trying to find a way to bring me back into the fold? Would it even matter if I returned? I had spent so long defining myself in opposition to them, but the idea of reconciliation was never something I had truly allowed myself to consider. I tucked the phone away, my decision weighing heavily on me. There was no right answer. What would it cost me to go back? What would it cost to stay away? There were no simple answers anymore, only a quiet tension between the woman I had become and the family that once defined me. For now, though, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the person I had been before. And whatever path I chose, it would be on my terms. Aunt Daisy's support and understanding had become a steady anchor in my life, and as I processed the gravity of the decision before me, I found comfort in knowing that, no matter the outcome, I wasn't alone. I decided to give myself time. The holidays were a natural pause in the chaos of life, a chance to reflect and recharge. After all, I had been through so much already. There was no rush to make a decision, and there was no expectation that I had to make it for anyone else's sake but mine. Christmas arrived, and despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of longing when I saw families coming together. The empty chair at my dinner table, once filled with the chaos and noise of my parents, Liam and Lionel, seemed to echo with what I'd lost. But the quiet of my evening was different now. It was not an absence of love, but a deliberate space I had created for myself. When Aunt Daisy invited me to visit her for New Year's, I didn't hesitate. A peaceful evening with her felt like the perfect way to close one chapter and open another. Over dinner, as we shared stories and laughed, the topic of my parents came up once more. "I know you're still weighing the decision, Sarah," Daisy said gently, setting down her fork. "And I respect that. But I want you to know, no matter what you choose, you've already made the hardest decision. You chose yourself." I nodded, taking a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. "I have, haven't I?" It feels strange to say that aloud, but it's true. I've spent my life trying to fix things for them, to fix us. But what if I've been ignoring my own needs for too long? Daisy smiled softly. "We all do, sometimes. But I think you've come to realize something really powerful. Family can be hard, but it's also about respect. You've learned to set boundaries where others never did." I felt a sense of pride swelling in my chest. It wasn't pride that came from triumph over them, but pride in the way I had fought to regain control over my own life. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own story. As New Year's Eve approached, the offer from my parents still loomed in the background. I thought about it. Would I go? Would I find some kind of peace or closure in that meeting? But then I realized something. The peace I was seeking wasn't going to come from a meeting. It would come from accepting that they may never change, but I had the power to walk away, to let go. That night, as I watched the fireworks from Daisy's porch, I made a promise to myself. No matter what happened next, I would continue to choose my own path. I would honor my own happiness and dignity, not as a reaction to what had been done to me, but as a celebration of what I had achieved. When the clock struck midnight, I felt a quiet confidence I had never known before. I wasn't just moving on from my past, I was building my future.